Dusty Dienst is the chief of the Faribault Fire Department, and I was surprised to see Rice County Sheriff Troy Dunn join him this morning. Troy, I didn't realize you were going to stop by. I appreciate it, though.
Well, Mike Monge made me a special firefighter once, so anytime I can hang out with the fire chief and his crew, I'll do that. So
yeah, this is part of his continuing ed. He has to keep that up. So
this is something that, you know, when you retire from the sheriff's department, you might want to become a firefighter, or what?
I don't know if I'll meet the age requirements at that time.
We'll make exceptions.
No, it's that, you know, Gordy, you've heard us talk so many times. We, when something bad happens, everybody comes together and works together, and you know, I know the firefighters have helped us many times on with traffic at crashes and things, and just like we help them at fires and dragging hoses up to the door and bringing ladders to them until they get more people there. And so no, I just was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd swing in and sit in with Dusty today.
Well, that's good, and as long as we had you here, there was a fire on Saturday out in rural Lonsdale, and tragically, a home was lost.
Yeah, that was about 11:30 it came in, and when the deputy arrived on scene, it came in as a garage fire, but it soon spread to the attached house, and Lonsdale Fire Department responded initially, and then they knew, because it was a large structure fire, they requested Northfield, Faribault, and Montgomery to assist with staffing and with tanker trucks. So, which was a good thing, because, as you know, it was very cold out there, and so it was nice to have rehab there. Northfield ambulance was on scene, and then they brought their rehab truck out. So it was a warm place for the firefighters to rotate in and out to stay hydrated and then actually warm up a little bit because of the bad conditions. But yeah, unfortunately the Ross family lost their home, and fortunately nobody was seriously injured. They just had a little bit of smoke inhalation.
This was the Allen Ross family.
That's
I want to
correct.
emphasize that, because there are a number of Rosses that live out there.
Yep. There's a number of relatives that live out there, but yeah, very sad, and you know, based on our initial investigation, it looks like it was started in the garage, probably by a space heater that they had for their cats. So, and Dusty can talk about
that's a common thing,
things.
I'm guessing. Space heaters a common cause?
Well, that's what we talked about last week. We were starting to see some of these happen in the last couple of weeks with the cold temperatures and the alternative heating, the things that people pull out to either keep themselves or their animals warm. And once you do that, there's some precautions that need to be taken, and even with the best precautions, it is heating, it is open flame, or it is electrical, and there's always a risk when you do that.
I'm guessing they were doing this for years, though. You know, bringing out the old space heater to keep the kitties warm when it gets cold.
Oh yeah, I mean, my dad does it in his shed, and I warn them, but you know, they still do it. And most equipment is UL listed, and it's all, if it's treated right, it's safe. But if it's war, anytime you introduce animals into it, we won't ever know, you know, for sure what happened in there. Did something go bad? Did a cat tip something over, touch something? You know, it's hard to say.
Chewing onto the wires we've seen in the past too. You know, where animals
squirrels or something, yeah. So
very sad, but I'm just glad that they were all able to get out. And shout out to those 4 fire agencies in Northfield ambulance for a job well done, and the 2 deputies that were working. And that was another thing too. We had a lot of traffic out there. It's a township road, and so we had traffic issues. Everybody wants to come see the big fire, where the smoke's coming from. So kind of makes it dangerous when you've got firefighters, you know, moving in and out. And they had trucks going, they were fighting it from 2 separate directions, and so the road was partially blocked. So fortunately, you know, we didn't have anybody get hurt there, but you know, it was people just coming in. The township roads are icy, and then they hit the brakes too late, and they're sliding off into the ditch, and came close to hitting a fire truck at least once while I was there. So,
oh my.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about fire prevention here during our AM Minnesota program with the Faribault Fire Chief, Rice County Sheriff on AM Minnesota.
Over the weekend down in Freeborn.
To find out how to get spray brand
see that?
2024
Freeborn, I think.
Go to our website.
Killed like 4,000 hogs.
Oh, we might have to be doing the talking now.
3927.
Yeah.
Let fragrance seed boost more farm income in 2015.
In Oneida, Minnesota, we have Faribault's Fire Chief Dusty Dienst with us and Rice County Sheriff Troy Dunn. Troy noting the Sheriff's Department were, what were you, the first on the scene there in the Lonsdale Rural Fire? Or?
Correct. Yep. Yep. And you know, so they took some photographs and everything, made sure everybody was out of the house, which is a great help to the fire department to, you know, in their investigation as well, because obviously fires tend to spread rather fast, and to know where the origin started and, you know, which way it's moving is always helpful to the fire department.
So they being the Sheriff's Department deputies, must get some training on fires. Don't you?
We get fire extinguisher training, and I mean, we do a lot of training with them, and you know, with traffic highway crashes and stuff, we work with the fire department on how to make safe zones, and then they're also very helpful in us telling you know, a lot of our training we get within hydrous and how to deal with that, because that's a very dangerous thing, and if a deputy drives up into a cloud of anhydrous, it's not going to be a good thing. So we're really good about training, doing joint training and some of our scenario-based training and reality-based training together with them from time to time, so that we make sure that we know, because they are the experts when it comes to fires and chemicals and those kind of things, so we rely on them heavily, and obviously work closely with them in emergency management as well.
Yeah, and I think also in the investigations, the law enforcement has a different, not a different view, but a different way of looking at it, and it's a big part of their job on that, investigating that and knowing right from the get-go that there's going to be a picture to put together here when it's all done. So we get a fair amount of training with the state fire marshal, but investigators with either with whatever law enforcement agency district that we're in are part of the investigation. The fire department, law enforcement, and if necessary, the state fire marshal office.
You know what amazes me on these mutual aid calls like this one is how you guys coordinate so well. You know, Lonsdale, Northfield, and Faribault probably don't fight fires every day of the week with each other, but it's very coordinated.
Yeah, there's some standard practices that we all do. We all have our little twist to them. But when it comes right down to like the hauling of the water, the new, well, it's not new anymore, but the radio system that we have, I was not at the fire, but I had my radio, so I was listening to how communications go, which is obviously key in coordinating a bunch of different departments. And now that we have this new system, the armor system, we can all talk, which in the past wasn't, it could happen, but it wasn't the easiest.
Right. And that all came out of 9/11, right?
Yes, and well, the state patrol was using it for a long time because it's a larger radio system that's good for the whole state. So the interoperability that they needed to have with all the agencies that they work with kind of pushed it. But I believe a lot of that did come from 9/11.
And you guys can communicate with each other too, right, Sheriff?
Definitely, yeah. We can go on you know, operations channels. We can go on regional technical TAC channels as well. So if we have a major event where we have multiple agencies and law enforcement, fire, and EMS working together, we can set up talk groups for each one. And you know, we don't want to get on their channel and start talking when they're trying to fight the fire, but yet whoever their on-scene commander is monitoring, you know, both channels so that they can talk. If there's a need from law enforcement or EMS, they can talk and get that help. But you know, they keep the operation channels for fighting the fire.
And fighting the flames may be easier than fighting the ice in a situation like you were at.
Well, you know, it can be, it can get slippery, it can get icy. Typically, not initially, and you know, it sounds bad, but we had a shed fire last Tuesday, and just because it's a fire, and the water that we use for a little while is warm, you don't get the initial ice skating rink everywhere. You know, you get up next to that fire and it's warm, the ground thaws, the snow melts away. So it's later on when the heat's gone, the flames are out, and you're extinguishing, you're wetting stuff down when you start to see a lot of ice. And then some of the new strategies that we use as far as getting water out of the tanks and recirculating. We don't dump water on the ground around the trucks if possible, just because that's where people are and it gets slippery. So there's some new ways of recirculating pumps and keeping the water from making a skating rink.
I told you last week about this fire in Orinoco where a home was lost, $400,000 value home, completely gone. And the cause there was improper nailing, which I had not heard before.
And we talked about that. I do remember that back in electrical school. It was talked about a nail got put into a wired-in trip a breaker, and their bill went way up through their siding. And it's a safety hazard. If someone were to have touched that, they could have gotten shocked. But somebody used too long a nail, either in the or a screw, either in the sheetrocking, or the odds of this happening, but hanging a pitcher and putting too big a screw and actually hitting a wire. I mean, the odds are pretty crazy. You couldn't do it if you wanted to,
right?
But crazy things happen.
I had just never seen that before as the cause of a fire in all my years. Improper nailing.
That's why we need good contractors out there, right?
Well, if you're the insurer.
Well, it can be interesting sometimes when you start doing the investigation in these things, and sometimes you can, most of the times you can narrow down the fire to where it started, even though you drive by like this house in rural Lonsdale, and it looks like a mess, and it is a mess. But if you get right down with a little shovel and moving stuff around, you can see some signs once you're trained to find out where things happen, and pictures and eyewitness accounts lead you, kind of help narrow that all down. But there are some tools, there are some techniques out there that in fire investigation, a lot of times you're ruling things out and boils right down to what's left, what could have happened. And sometimes it's you have to get a little, what's the word for it? You have to get a little creative in your thought process and how this could have happened. But a lot of it is just normal everyday things that we all do that we don't think of, and someone has some bad luck and it ends up in a fire.
But again, the improper nailing for sure could have been prevented.
Could have been prevented, yep. When you go to hang something up, and I guess not knowing exactly if it was in a remodel, there's a lot of different opportunities that could lead towards improper nailing. But like we talked about, just something to think about when you hang something up in your house, or if you are doing some fixing of something on your own. Contractors work with this stuff every day, and they know the proper length of a sheetrock screw to use to put on half-inch sheetrock. And you don't just grab the one that's on top of the drawer and have it be too long, but that's okay, it'll hold better. There's reasons for the length and the diameters and the size of fastening things that are used in construction.
You carry extinguishers in all your sheriff's vehicles?
We do, yes, we do, and a lot of times that can help. Especially, we probably use them more on car fires where it's, not fully involved yet, maybe in the engine compartment, where we can knock it down before it spreads and gets into the fuel line. Then it gets real ugly. And I know we've used them on a couple dryer fires and things like that, where we are able to knock the flames down as well. So a lot of times, if you have time, and hopefully this wasn't on Dusty's thing to say, but when you have appliances that are on fire, especially electric ones, if you can disconnect the plug-in or shut the breaker off to it, a lot of times that'll help as well, because it's not getting that current, not feeding it as much, and once it burns into the plastic and you knock it down, then you're better. But I'm not asking people to go back in the house to do those things. Obviously, we want you safe first and foremost, but just some of those things, those tips, and don't throw water on a grease fire. Those things are all things that people need to know, and we
doesn't hurt to remind people either.
It does not hurt to remind people. So
which is why we had Dusty come on today. Give us some fire prevention tips. I did some looking up some statistics. 2,500 people die every year in this country from home fires. 12,600 are injured in home fires in the United States. Direct property loss due to home fires is estimated at $7.3 billion a year. That's a lot of damage.
Yeah, and I just brought something up here too. It says 10% of home fires, this is 2013, a little older, but I don't think it changes a whole lot,
Right.
were caused by heating devices. You know, just like the fire over the weekend. We don't know exactly how that started again, but it had something to do with that, and it's going to be part of the blame because either it was electricity to the heating device, the stuff around it, but it has something to do with the heating device.
And the sheriff talked about how fast fires can develop. I read where in just 2 minutes a fire can become life-threatening, and in 5 minutes completely engulf a home.
Rule of thumb that I've always heard, and there's a lot of variables that go into it, but a fire will double every minute. And I could hear it in the deputy's voice when he arrived up in Lonsdale that, you know, it's the garage now, but by the time you get here, the whole house will be engulfed. And you know, it depends on that was, I think, wood-sided home, so there's a lot of variables that go into
When
that.
it's a rural area, it's going to take longer to get there.
Yep.
Yep. And the roads are icy, so they can't go quite as quickly as they might be able to as well. So the fire truck doesn't do any good in the ditch if you can't get it to the fire. And
Yep. So the rule of thumb is the fire double every minute.
So when it gets to a certain point, you guys make the decision to just let it go, but keep it somewhat under control, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's up to the officer in charge, but there's something that we use as far as a risk versus reward or benefit. So if everybody's out of the house, that's our first thing. We'll risk a lot to save a lot, and when
Sure.
we're talking about saving a lot, we're talking about lives.
Right.
Especially people, but you know, to some extent animals. So we'll go out on a limb and we'll do some, what I'd call pretty crazy stuff to save somebody's life. But when you start talking about property and that kind of stuff, then we take a step back and we don't want to risk anybody's life. You know, save a building that can be replaced.
There was a home fire in Rochester last week where 18 cats had to be saved by the firefighters.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've done that. We've been asked, you know, people are out. We've been asked if we can go in and get them. We say we'll do the best we can, and you know, animals are smart, so they'll probably get out. You know, sometimes they'll get out before people will, if or with the people as the door opens. But you know, tragically, sometimes they don't. They run and hide, and you know, they succumb to smoke. But we like to think that we can save everything. We also put pretty high value on people's property, things that can't be replaced. You know, a home, it can rebuild that. But you know, you start talking about photos and heirlooms and that kind of stuff. You know, we don't totally write those off. But we don't want to risk anybody's life for that either.
Yeah, you want to make sure you have replacement value on your home insurance.
Correct, and if there's things that may be above and beyond, you have to talk to your insurance agent. You know, might have to have some extra, or it's always good to have like a fireproof, like a safe, something along that line that can withstand quite a bit of heat, and you know, may not look the same when it's all done. But if the contents inside there, like abstracts and titles and that kind of stuff, it's good to have in a fireproof safe.
And years ago, it was recommended to me. I thought it was a very smart recommendation to video everything in your home.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go back to replace that, there's the video of what you have in
Right.
there.
Now make sure you put that video somewhere that doesn't burn
Safe,
up.
yeah, like your safety deposit box.
Yep.
Yep.
So I always thought that was a great idea.
It is a good idea. We like that for not only fires, but for in case, you know, you would have a burglary too. You can show it, you know, what it looked like and serial numbers, everything else. It's great to have that.
You know, there's people, Troy Temple, Julie Fox, those are a couple of people that will come do that for you.
Sure.
A couple of people locally. Anyway, heat and smoke can be more dangerous than the flames, I read.
Usually it's the smoke. Yep, because the smoke gets way ahead of the heat. The fires, you know, if it's a garbage can, the flames are going to stay there until it grows out of there, but the smoke's going to go out throughout the house. You'd be amazed how much even, I'll never forget a crock pot that didn't really even catch on fire, but it melted down, and the whole house was blackened from the smoke of just a crock pot.
Wow.
So there's a lot of smoke that it gets given off, and that's why it's important to have smoke detectors. If your smoke detectors are working and you have the right number, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to get out of your home well before a fire ever traps you in it.
Were they working in Lonsdale?
I don't recall if if it was the smoke detectors or if they just happened to see a little bit of smoke coming from the garage.
Fire's not going to wake you up at night, right, Dusty?
No, and that's what we tell people when they're, where do I put smoke detectors? Where do I put CO detectors? Well, in this case, not knowing, but you really don't need a smoke detector to tell you there's a fire during the day when you're there. Your senses will do that for you. You can see it, smell it, that kind of stuff.
When you're sleeping.
Detectors are made to go somewhere that you're sleeping, so you can wake up, because you're not going to see or smell that when you're sleeping.
Well, and what I read, man, this cold is crazy. What I read was you actually can go into a deeper sleep if there's a fire from inhaling the smoke.
I suppose, yeah, the CO will do that to you. That's in the, CO will do that when it's being made by, other devices, your furnace or something else that's not working properly. But that's a big component of smoke is CO, and it'll do the same thing. Yep, it'll just, that's how CO gets you, is just put you to sleep more and more.
Asphyxiation is the leading cause of fire deaths. Exceeds burns by a 3-to-1 ratio.
And then the toxins that are in that smoke are really bad for you too.
Yeah,
So
poisonous.
a lot of bad stuff in there. So, and since you brought up CO detectors, Gordy, if I could just remind everybody, the people that are out ice fishing, to have those CO detectors in their fish houses, because unfortunately, we've had some close calls and actually lost people in the past due to carbon monoxide poisoning. So put those in your fish house, especially if you're sleeping out there.
Every year we seem to have one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's a bummer.
Well, it's a small spot. It doesn't take, again, those are heating units that aren't used very often, and they don't get serviced very well or cleaned. And it's a small, even a big fish house is a small area, and it doesn't take long to fill that up to a dangerous level.
But when you were on before, didn't you say cooking fires are number one?
Oh, fires.
That's number one.
Yep, cooking, and then again, that's because there's open flame or there's heating going on, and it happens every day. Alternative heat or just heat in general typically is just for the winter months, so you don't see it as much. Just the odds are it's not used as much as cooking goes on almost every household every day.
Anything I didn't think of here, Dusty, before we...
No, we just want to, kind of dwell on the clearances. A lot of these fires that deal with heating stuff can deal with clearances. So keep your space heaters away from combustibles. It's common to plug them in. They may have a short cord. You plug them in along a wall. Make sure that there's not any combustibles around there, like drapes or curtains or wooden shelves. Make sure your wood stove, say if your wood stove is in a shop that you don't use a lot, make sure that the chimney has been cleaned out.
That's where the shed fire came in, right? There was a wood.
Yeah, we're suspecting a wood stove. Again, that homeowner took good photos, and it was coming from that end of the shed. So not ruling out other things. We're looking at that, but we'll probably never know exactly how it got out of the wood stove. But he had clearances correct, but you don't want stuff to pile up alongside of those things. So make sure things are installed to correct clearances.
3 feet's the magic number, right, for your heating?
Yep, 3 feet is a good number. Keep a 3-foot circle around anything that you're heating, clear of combustibles.
And then we see in old farmhouses and some manufactured homes, people putting heaters under their floor to keep the pipes from freezing. And that's another thing where we've run into some issues in the past. Yeah, use
the equipment that's made for it. Don't put. I've seen NIPCO heaters underneath trailer houses to keep it warm underneath there. That's
And that's an open flame.
Yep, and that's not a good idea. But sometimes people get desperate or they don't know. So there are things that if used correctly that can heat places and pipes safely. But it's when we start using things that when they weren't meant to do that we start seeing problems.
Well, we only got a couple minutes left of the show. You probably don't have any statistics for the last year yet from your department, right?
We do, other than we're 197 runs higher than last year. I don't have it broke down into fires.
Most of those are medical, though.
Most of them are medical, but we did have a bad run, if you will, last year around this time of the year. With I think that I can remember 4 structure fires in December, January of last year. Thankfully, they've been down the second half of 16. Mm-hmm. The shed fire out in Walcott was our first one that we've had in a while, and that's our goal.
Now you would like to have none.
Like to have none, and that's a goal. That's not it's fairly unrealistic because there's, you know, with human beings being a part of things, but that's what you want to shoot for, just like law enforcement shoots towards zero death. That's the goal. That's what you're striving for. All your education, all your doing the kind of things. That's what we're after.
Have you seen the remodeled fire hall?
It's really, yeah, it looks great. You know, it's well overdue, and you know, it looks great in there. So.
Yeah, I bring that up because, you know, you have a new fire hall in Morristown. They're building one in Kenyon, so a lot of the areas are in need of new fire halls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all about the same age, you know, in the world in this area, and things were built about the same time. So you're starting to see some of those buildings because of various reasons, whether it's efficiency or change of use or size of trucks. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons, but you know, hopefully a lot of it is efficiency for energy, because we're using taxpayer dollars to heat and light and all that stuff. So you know, putting in LEDs and all the stuff that's out there is great for all of us.
Well, times have changed.
Yeah, and you know, Dusty, I don't know. I know there's always talk of growth and everything. I wouldn't be surprised down the road that if they continue growing north in the Faribault area, especially in the industrial park, that you might be looking at opening a second station somewhere someday.
It's probably in our future.
There was talk on the east side of it when Monge was there, but
yeah, Mike always was concerned, and rightfully so. Access to the east side is, you know, quite limited depending on what's going on. So
we should have opened that conversation earlier, because I'm running out of time. Thanks, Troy, for coming by.
Thanks.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for the hot chocolate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Dusty.
You're welcome.
That concludes today's edition of AM Minnesota. Hopefully it's not too hot, because, you know, but we got the fire.